Like a fat guy putting on shots, you split your sides at Thursday Thoughts. Welcome to this week's edition of Thursday Thoughts with Eddie Anchor. I'm your host, Eddie Anchor. It was a huge week in the Thunderdome coming out of the bye with some huge upsets and a lot of games going right down to the wire. The big grudge match between Bunga and Matt was one for the ages, and thankfully Matt came through with the goods. We would hate to think what the celebration would have been like if Bunga had have won. So, before we take a look at this week's games, let's glance our eyes over how the ladder looks after the weekend's events. You'll notice something that hasn't changed all year, but finally has now. Can you guess what it is? You'll notice for the first time in 11 weeks, Chris has finally peeled his team from the bottom of the ladder and rocketed it all the way up to second bottom with a bullet. Ben, who it must be said was incredibly unlucky to lose to Tom on the weekend by 20 points, puts one hand on the wooden spoon as reward for his efforts. In a brief interview midweek, he said, and I quote, "I'm going to finish 6th. I don't need any players now. I'm set. If I can win 2 of the next 4, I won't lose another game when Mitchell returns." Well, while it's good to see Ben optimistic, sometimes even the power of positive thinking isn't quite enough to save you. I mean, look at this fellow who was optimistic. No one else has changed with, not much else has changed with Tom still on top and the same 5 D-bags underneath him fighting it out for second place. There is probably more interest down at the bottom of the ladder at this stage in the race for the wooden spoon. Now, let's move on to this week's matchups. Bunga versus Tricky. With both of these two still 2 games behind top spot, this becomes an 8-point game. One slip up here and it will be a long way back to try and win the league. We could be looking at the first of many elimination matches to come as the season starts to hot up. Bunga has probably been the most disappointing of all the coaches this year. With all the hype around him on the back of a dubious pick 1, he's managed to turn a solid start to the season into a poo sandwich. Now currently sitting in 6th spot, his team has become the laughing stock of the competition. Tricky will be looking to continue his red-hot form, having won 4 of his last 5 games. Tricky is paying so little respect to his opposition this weekend, he's going away and leaving the team in the hands of his assistant coach. This may certainly even things up in the mental capacity. Tricky by 120. Robbo versus Matt. There could not be 2 more opposite gentlemen in the league than these two. Matt is sitting at 8 wins and 3 losses. Robbo has 3 wins and 8 losses. Matt has won 4 of his last 5. Robbo has lost 4 of his last 5. Matt's season is going well. Robbo's is not. Robbo's a good-looking, fit, intelligent lad. And you get my drift. This will be one tough game for Robbo to watch with a hint of sadomasochism to creep into it. For every possession Matt's captain and Robbo's love child gets, it'll be a pleasure and pain for him. I'm sure his 12-inch rubber Dangerfieldo will get a decent workout over the weekend just to numb the pain. Matt won't let this opportunity to put his claim to be this year's champion and will brush Robbo aside like a vegetarian pizza. Matt by 200 points. Steve versus Callum. Who would have picked that by round 11, these two, both with top 5 draft picks, would have been in the bottom half of the ladder? In actual fact, 100% of all people asked would have said that. It is absolutely no surprise to anybody that these two, who are, let's be honest, just making up the numbers so the league will last 22 rounds. We can't really say any more. Callum by 25 points. Commish versus Chris. There is only one thing on the line this week. Pride. Not for Chris, I mean for the Commish. The pride of being able to say at the end of the year, I was bad this year, but not bad enough to lose to Chris. With some reasonable form coming into this matchup, and finally off the bottom of the ladder, Chris will be looking to jump up another place on the ladder with a big win this week. With the bottom four all dead and locked away on 3 wins, The loser here will be putting one hand on the coveted wooden spoon. The commish has a few key ins this week, with Jared Grant and Stephen Martin back in for their first games of the year. I can see these picks backfiring big time on him, as it's genuinely desperate move to bring in two blokes for their first game and expect miracles. On the back of that, I can see Chris making it 4 wins in the last 5 and sending the commish spiralling towards the spoon. Chris by 11. Ben versus Andy. There could be a shortage of nose plugs this week because both of these men think their shit doesn't stink. Andy comes into this game on the back of a horrific loss to the most incompetent coach in the league, while Ben managed yet another honourable loss to Tom. Which is strange for the least honourable man in the Thunderdome to have one of those. While Ben still thinks he's a lock to finish in the top 6, reality is about to give him a swift kick in the plums. Hell bent on bouncing back, Andy and his team have been out on the track early Monday morning, moving his collection of textbooks from his parents' house to his new headquarters. Fair to say, some of those books were mighty heavy. The Thunderdome treasure hunt has finally been run and won after 2 years of searching. Someone has finally completed the final item. A photo of Andy with a beer in his hand. I suggest this photo was taken in anticipation of this week's romp in the park. Andy by 120. Tom versus Hayden. In the final game of the week, this is one of the few that actually means something. The winner of this week could be the king of the castle by the round's end. Neither of these two come into this game in overly impressive form. Both of them fell in against two of the bottom feeders of the comp. The commish managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory against Hayden, while Ben made Brock McLean captain against Tom. Good move. Never have there been two individuals so evenly matched in a battle of wits, both genuinely occupying the same mental atmosphere. It is hard to go against Tom, as he has actually deserved his position on the table to this point, while Hayden is due to be exposed as the fraud that he is sooner rather than later. With by far the lowest number of points scored this year of anyone in the top 6, it's been lucky fixturing that has him sitting at 3rd rather than down in the bottom 6 where he should be. His day is coming though, and that day will be Monday. Tom will steamroll him. Tom by 200 points. And now, it's time for a word from our sponsors. This week's Free Agent of the Week will be brought to you by RSPCA. Hello, I'm James Waterfeather, and I'm a volunteer down at the RSPCA. Every week, hundreds of players are cast aside from their families out into the street. Especially around buy time, people think they are cute and a great gift to get their kids while they're little. What we have to remember, though, is some of these players grow up and become players like Jeff Garlett and Trent West. We have a wonderful story from last week where one of our older free agents, who isn't as cute or as cuddly as the others, but was still taken into a good home and loved and cared for. Bradshaw duly repaid his new owner with a good score that resulted in a victory for his team. So this round, reach deep into your hearts, and instead of opting to get a brand new player, why not come down to the RSPCA and give a free agent, just like this one here, a new home. This week's Free Agent of the Week is a bit of an old favourite of ours down at the RSPCA. He's been around the shelter for a number of years now. He may not have the cutest face or the best consistency, but he's a little Aussie battler. He's been doing it tough the last few years, barely being able to make ends meet, not wondering where his next meal's going to be coming from. But every dog has his day, and for this dog, this week is his. Tom Scully has an exceptional record against very few opposition. Fortunately, Essendon happened to be one of them. Their loose checking style of play and in-close stoppage setup should allow Tom Scully to continue to get on the outside and break away from the stoppages. With some good recent form to help make a case for him, I suspect this will be one of the few weekends where Tom Scully hasn't been a complete waste of money. Thank you very much for the kind people down at the RSPCA. Now it's time to move straight into Eddie Anger. I only have one genuine bee in my bonnet this week. Patrick Dangerfield. I've always been, and still am, a huge fan of his. But last week's game had me questioning whether I've had him wrong all along. When people think Patrick Dangerfield, they think of a courageous, committed superstar who can electrify games in the twinkling of an eye. Last week, the Crows had arguably this year's #1 ruckman in Sam Jacobs, absolutely dominating young Zach Smith on his way back from ACL surgery, mind you. They were getting armchair service at all the stoppages, Patrick being one of the prime beneficiaries of this sort of tap work. So, please explain to me why, as a supposed premier clearance player of the competition, you would decide to take it upon yourself and try and take the ruck tap. If you are in the air, who the hell do you think is going to be hitting the ball to? You've carried that midfield all year. You never saw Charlie Watts trying to sing solo over the top of Mick Jagger, did you? Stick to what you do best. To make matters worse, not only did you stuff up the ruck tap, but you jammed your knee right into Sam Jacobs and took him out for the entire game. It's moments like this that make me suspect that Paddy isn't a courageous player. He's just stupid and unco. Too stupid to know he's putting himself in dangerous situations, and too unco to get out of the way of everyone trying to poleaxe him. Stay out of the ruck, you flog! Thank you very much for that, Eddie. Eddie Anger was extremely fired up this week. Can't really blame him. Now, on the weekend, one of the Thunderdome's own, Callum, made his AFL debut. We actually have his match stats here. They were sent in by an anonymous viewer. Alright, let's have a look at them. We got 3 kicks, 1 throw, 1 offside, 4 double dribbles, 2 technical fouls, 11 hit-outs at 9% efficiency, and 2 behinds. Now, it's fair to say he's got plenty of room for improvement. There won't be any Thunderdome coaches lining up to pick him up as a free agent this week, that's for damn sure. With a total of 15 Supercoach points, he is right up there with Chris Judd in total points for the season. Now, we have been lucky enough to get some match footage of the boy. Whoops! Wrong footage, although, as you'll see, you'll hardly tell the difference. Robbo with the brilliant commentary in the background. That kick was actually to win the match. His team ended up losing by 4 points, unfortunately, because of it. But that was a point for the ages. We're hoping to get a camera crew to the ground for his next match and follow his AFL career with intent. Now, move on to this week's Weekly Wanker. This week's Weekly Wanker is as easy as you like. This is the first one not to come out of the Thunderdome. But after his efforts this week, it's impossible to ignore him any longer. There are some things that can be said in this world and some that cannot. Some may consider the words this man uttered to be completely sacrilegious, and they would be right. Any man who can stand before a group of people and genuinely question the quality of the Big Texan is a wanker in my book. The Big Texan is an icon, a symbol of hope, a beacon of optimism. The opportunities in the Crows' future lie on the broad shoulders of this power forward. The Texan is a dying breed of footballer, the larrikin, the character, the last of the true full forwards. So for several years of unwarranted slander upon the great man, Trev, you can cop the first honorary Weekly Wanker Award. May the Big Texan forever continue to kick bags. We all remember Mark Williams at the grand final. One day, the Big Texan may be holding the cup aloft screaming, "Trev, you were wrong!" Thank you for tuning in for another week. We'll do it all again next week. I wish you and your families a safe and exciting long weekend. Enjoy the footy and good luck with your teams. Eddie out.
Thursday night is here again, a little after 10:15. The wife's asleep, the children too. That leaves a man with one thing to do. Bring out the laptop, it's time for your date. Settle in and learn your fantasy fate. With a bang, Eddie welcomes you in. He turns his hat, then it's time to begin. The week that was, you might rather forget. Who is the dud and who is the jet? Start the weekend with a dose of the anchor, and laugh your ass off at weekly wanker. Like Federer down at the cots, here's your serve of Thursday thoughts. Like a hobo eating his Watts, here's your fill of Thursday thoughts. Like a fat guy putting on shorts, you'll split your sides at Thursday thoughts.